there everyone, it's Kelly Folsom here and welcome back to another Vital Art session. In today's lesson we are going to be discussing brass, how to get that look of the color of brass and the reflectivity of brass. I've thrown in some other objects as well so that you can carry your painting further into a work of art. Alright, so let's get started. Okay everyone, so today we are talking about brass, and we have already painted copper and silver before in our lessons this year. So the primary difference between brass and copper and silver is sort of the general color family that it will be in. So all of them are more neutral versions of these colors. But copper is generally more in this, red-orange family, has more red and orange to it. And brass typically has more of can have the yellow-orange, which this particular brass does have quite a bit of in it. So it can range from a yellow-orange to a yellow-green. Whereas the silver tends to be more neutral, but will have a lot more of the cool tones like the violet blues and violets in silver. But however, a very neutral version, washed out version. So, all right. So that's the first thing that we want to identify, and you can always use your color wheel, or if you have color charts that you have made, of course you can look and see, okay, well this color, I'm seeing this color a lot in this particular brass picture. So I know that that's sort of a desaturated yellow-orange. So, and of course, again, I have put in some other elements here for you to carry your painting further, but the primary focus on the teaching will be on the brass. I've toned my panel with my black oil here from Old Masters, which is a speed dryer, and I'm using the Meriget. And I've toned it with blue, ultramarine blue, and burnt umber, bending it a little bit more to the blue this time. I decided to pair this arrangement with all the warms in front with like a deep, rich blue. Sometimes I think it's kind of nice to have a more particular color back there than just the black if I'm going for more of a complementary color. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to try to match that color precisely back there or the value, but just that's sort of the idea of the color strategy that I'm going for, just so you know. All right, so just kind of getting started with a loose drawing. We have grapes over here leading up there in front. So of course I'm going to look at those baselines where things are hitting the tabletop plane. Anything that's in front is going to be lower down on your canvas. So that's one way that you want to try to get more depth into your picture, is by, even on a shelf top still life, making sure that you're looking for those layers of space. If you're not conscientious of the layers in space, then you won't get it into your painting. So we've got a little grape here. We've got this little cluster of apricots. You say apricots. I say apricots. Apricots. I don't know which way you're supposed to say that. So anyways, and as you see, I generally just plug in like a whole size here for all three apricots together, and then we have table edge in front. Okay, so we remember back from one of our Tuesday's tips, we've talked about trying to get more layers in space and a foreground, a middle ground, and a background definitely in place. So just continuing on with, let me switch to a bigger brush. to really get some of this background covered. So a lot more blue, maybe even some black. Doesn't really need to be that blue necessarily. But on the shadow side, I would like to really have a nice deep rich color. That golden color of the brass pitcher will really stand out nicely from this. And although my shadow values on the brass may be quite similar, I'm going to lighten it up a bit now. They'll be quite similar in value, they'll be a different color. So all of the shadow tones on the brass is going to be more in the warm family. That didn't lighten it up at all. I took it right back to what it was. All right. So, and remember too, with your background color and such, you know, it's more important to get enough of it in, and especially around your foreground objects. But don't stress out too much about it being, you know, the perfect color or the perfect value. Just enough in place to get us started. So that kind of sets the tone, sets both the value and the tone. And eventually too we'll curve that a little bit more. All right. I could go ahead actually and just take some straight burnt umber, kind of mixing in with that blue that's left on my brush, just to get a warmer tone up front. But it will also kind of have that a little bit of that blue from the background in there too, just to kind of keep some unity, color unity going on. All right, so we a lot of the local color in metal, as I've mentioned, does tend to show up in the highlight. So more, well, I shouldn't say local color, but more of the pure color will show up in the highlight. So if you wanted to kind of get an idea of that, we know that we're in sort of the yellow-orange family, let's say with some white, and, you know, I'm even seeing a little bit of yellow-green. But you could, you know, just go ahead and kind of get a hit of that right away if you wanted to. And then here. All right. So we want to kind of start with like our darker tones, and I would say darker and warmer for the shadows. So maybe more of a desaturated yellow-orange. You could use burnt umber and yellow. You could use some black and cad yellow deep, and you may need to warm it up a little bit with a touch of red oxide. I think the red oxide is going to be more useful here than, say, the cadmium red. Okay, and as always, I'm trying to start off simply first, thinking about 3 values. So I know that it's darkest here because of the light blocker is casting a shadow onto that starting side of the picture, the way I have it set up. And this is actually the shadow side over here. And I'm not dealing with reflected lights or little accents or details yet. And then the middle actually goes a bit lighter. It's still relatively close in value, and actually I'm going to neutralize that with a little bit of my background color. Okay, that's better. So I want a little bit more of a softer fusion here. A lot of times too, go across the form would be helpful than just vertically, you know, just kind of slows that brush stroke down. And there's, you know, sort of some green and grayish bits in here. And I'm just going to fill this in. We've got a lot of these little ridges here, but it will be a lot easier for me to paint by, you know, painting on top of sort of a mass of color. And so part of that, part of that background color too that I'm using was partly intentional because I knew that it would neutralize some of this color and even take it a little bit to the green. So the top plane is getting a little more light, and so I'm going to start adding in a little bit more of this cadmium lemon, and that's kind of where I start to see more of the yellow green. And again, I'm not, you know, there's dusting on this, there's all kinds of goodies going on, but I want a really simple shape to begin with. And I should have perhaps at the same time dealt with the, you're going to see the same type of colors, you know, like a darker color here on the spout. So going back to that, let's go back to that burnt umber and black and a little bit of cad orange. And then again, it's going to get a little bit warmer and lighter. However, it won't pick up quite as much light as, say, this top plane here. And as I was sort of trying to sew those two transitions together, I kind of over lightened that starting edge. All right, and same idea up here, the darkest point, and this is a place where you can really make a decision. There's just the darkest edge right here, and right now it's the same value as the background, so you can make a decision to leave it mysterious like that if you want that to recede more, and just pull light against the top of the handle, or you can lighten the background. Say if you want to pop both sides, I'll show you what I mean. So let's say you decide you want both parts of both the top and the bottom part of the handle to be more seen. Well, then you could adjust the value on this side of the handle. Let's do it more dramatically so that you can see it better. Okay. So you could start the edge there and then kind of blend it out. And don't worry too much about blending yet at this stage. Generally, you're going to perhaps soften some things up as you go, but we're just trying to get all the big pieces in. So hopefully you can see that. Let me kind of, since that's picking up glare, just to try to illustrate it to you better. So that becomes, you know, a dark against light on that edge. And then on the top, you know, we can start to lighten it up a little bit more. The key is going to be that smaller forms do reflect less light back to our eye. So basically we want the most amount of buildup of light to be on this top left-hand side. Let's just finish out the drawing a little bit here. And as this kind of peaks up into the light, it's going to be darker down here and then slowly start to come out into the light a little bit more. So all of this can stay a bit, you know, closer in value, although there's a color change, but closer in value. Now you could also use just, you know, like blue and orange yellow orange in this case. Together, you know, those are complementary colors enough that they will neutralize one another. And I would recommend too that you get the base first the way that you want it and take your time with that, getting your drawing accurate. I don't have as much time to do that in these demonstrations, but so you can take more time with that and get your drawing just the way that you want it. And just because this is getting a little distracting and busy back here for me, I think I'm just gonna take that soft hair brush and just sort of blend it out very, very gently at the moment. That's kind of up to you, depending on how much that's distracting your attention. So we're going to have, you know, this path of highlight that goes down like this, along these little ridges, and then it's going to taper, you know, with this side of the contour just slightly, but the maximum amount of light is going to be like here. So we'll get that started. Okay. Let me put in a little bit of color for the grapes, some ultramarine and some Cab Red Deep. I think all of, you know, the purples and the blues really look nice with these yellow oranges and yellow greens. Just some indication there of where the stem would be. And we'll get on a few of these highlights. It's always good to get a little bit of finish as you go. Okay, so now let's say painting wet into wet, you may run into an issue where, especially if you're working quickly like this, that the paint is not sticking for you very well. So, you know, wet on top of wet. So you can switch to your palette knife, or, you know, if you really want to load up a good amount of paint like this short bright, it almost acts just like a palette knife in my mind. To me, it's what it seems like, and that will really load on some thick, juicy paint. So, and I want to look again against that picture up there and see, okay, you know, it's almost, the highlight is almost like a pure yellow orange. It's not quite straight yellow, so this is a little too orange here, and then this would be the cadmium lemon might be a little too yellow. I am going to put a little bit of white, touch of white in it. And then the palette knife is nice too, because you can get like a crisper edge, since we're dealing with these little, I don't know, little ridges. I don't know what they would be called, but so we're getting the look of highlight, and we're also getting the look of these little ridges, and so we've got 4 of them, and you could do just 3. You know, you can really do whatever you want. But the main thing is to decide what you want to do. All right, and then I would say the dominant highlight on the very top almost goes a little more washed out, like a little more of that cab lemon and some white. And if it moves in any one direction, it's going to sort of swirl and curl, I keep using curl today, kind of curve with, you know, with this side of the contour. So if it moves in any direction, that's the direction it's going to sort of have a tail moving in that direction, if that makes sense. Now, once we get down here, the highlight kind of gets a little softer, a little more blended. We're not dealing with those ridges, and it also gets a little dimmer. So taking some of this color, mixing it in, and then going back to a brush to sort of get some of that fused look. And so you could build it up, start it off sort of softer. Mostly want to think about, okay, the direction that it's moving in. And then if you're seeing, you know, a little stronger hit up here, closer. And then on the foot, we've got another little foot here. It's not quite as noticeable. Like, always kind of go back and squint your eyes a little bit, or, you know, just get a fresh look at the setup, and you'll notice which area should have more contrast. So my eye is first drawn here. It's only whenever I'm really looking at this for a while that I start to see these minor details, like, oh, there's a little bit of light and dusting on top of this, but it should be very subtle. So watch your focus, watch what you're focusing on, because sometimes your eyes are switching focus and you're starting to paint something really contrasting, but you're seeing it out of context. All right. Hopefully that makes sense. And I want to gradate this a little bit more. I see like a soft yellowish green that'll kind of bring in some of the background color. And I don't want to get rid of that contrast or over soften that highlight edge, but I just want to kind of fuse that area together a little bit more. So then another thing I might begin to look for would be some darker contrasting edges, so underneath these ridges. And the shadow really starts right about here, so your shadow colors are always darkest the start of the shadow, and cast shadows are usually darker. So cast shadows underneath these ridges, right? So as that is casting a shadow on the next piece underneath, and I might really want to accentuate it more over here. Like, I don't really want a black inky line underneath that highlight. I don't need that start, stop, you know, feeling sensation there. All right, so to get some context for and this is kind of nice to have the apricots in here because we can sort of compare the colors. So the apricots are much more sort of that peachy color. You know, some bits have a little bit of yellow on them, but to make sense of the reflected lights that are happening in that brass, which again, brass, like all metal, is reflective. It's shiny, it's kind of mirror-like, so it's going to pick up colors in the surrounding area. And so that's one characteristic of metal that is different than, say, painting a ceramic vase or something. That's non-reflective. Well, this back one is not quite as ripe, and that's kind of nice because it's a little more of a yellow-green, which gives us a little variety, also brings in a little bit of that blue tone back there, so that's kind of fun. Alrighty. So now that I have some of that color in, I can start to make sense of light is hitting this and bouncing back into the side plane. And reflected lights are generally always softer than highlights or surface light. So you want it to be a little bit dimmer, and generally the reflection, this is what's causing the reflection, but generally the reflection is warmer and not quite, as light in value, not as light in value at all. We've also got a bit of, background blue. Oh, that's our timer. Got a little bit of background blue in here showing up as well. So that would be nice to get that in. I'm just going to add a little bit of red and orange to this shadow, for the shadow color of the apricots. Yeah, I've already got that color for the brass. So just to make sure that I don't leave this without some form shadow. So your form shadows, of course, should always be a little bit darker in value and warmer. And I'm just reassessing here the value range on, it goes darker down here. So I'm going to pull in a little bit darker value there, which should help to intensify the look of the reflected light. Maybe a little more red. So I like to start the reflected lights off a little softer and then get a little more specific. There's also reflected light that is hitting up underneath these little ridges, and you guys can choose whether or not if you want to do those. I think they're kind of fun. There's even a touch of that underneath here. So if it's showing up in one place, but it'll be brighter and stronger closer to the apricots, and I would say the biggest one will be here. But if you really look at this, your setup, you're going to start seeing, oh gosh, there's even a little bit of that apricot reflection in this back side of this grape, or you're going to see how the apricot color is spilling out onto the tabletop as well. So, and in that way, you're going to start getting more of a look of moving light and atmosphere in your paintings. Okay, so unfortunately I'm running out of time here, but I would, although this value is okay, I would like to get some more solid paint down. And this is that flat, so you can get a sharper edge, kind of shovel load it, get a sharper edge with that flat versus the filbert. I'm always kind of thinking about making sure that I'm thinking about the movement of light in the painting as a whole, and not just, one solid color all the way across. So, this is what I was talking about earlier too, maybe getting in, this might be too much, but getting in some of that look of light or glow on that side. There's some highlights, important highlights that show sharp plane changes. For example, here, it's going to be smaller, not quite as intense. on the pitcher handle. And if you need to, come back and quiet some highlights and make some a little bit stronger, then that would be, my next step is just carrying this further, looking for more subtleties. So there's highlight, but there's also light hitting all of these top little ledges here. So that would be something I would want to carry on with. Or if I see dusting, there's actually quite a bit of etching on this, so there actually is some cool etching design that you could also put in if you want. But, sort of these light planes that get hit with more of the dusting is kind of important to get in as well. There's a little opening here. But hopefully that will give you guys a good place to start on understanding how to paint brass. Okay, happy painting.